Hello and welcome to the Groupthink Podcast. Joining us today is a guest I'm very proud to have on the show. He's been an amazing help to me behind the scenes as I've slowly been working on my way through the conservative blogosphere as of late. He's published 2 of my essays at the website Hollywood and Toto as of today. He's a conservative film critic by the name of Christian Toto. How's it going, man?
Good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Sure. So I've talked to you on and off for a couple of years now, and you've been immensely helpful in getting me and kind of helping me kind of spread my wings and meet people online. I've been tell me a little bit about your kind of rise in the blogosphere. Like, when did you get into film criticism, and what was your coming out experience as a conservative like?
Well, the trick is to get 3 art degrees and then never ever use them. That was my trick. Yeah, I'll try to condense this as quickly as possible. Graduated art school thinking I have no idea what to do with this, so I started doing movie reviews for my local newspaper because that's what I loved. And I just kind of segued into writing. And then I had 2 different newspaper jobs where I wasn't the movie guy, but I kind of elbowed my way in a little bit. The first time I just got a couple of reviews, and the second one at the Washington Times, I became kind of one of the full-time movie critics. So after that experience, I went out on my own and moved to Denver. And I've been basically making it up as I go along ever since. I created a website, which was sort of short-lived, and now I have Hollywood and Toto. I have a podcast to do radio appearances, and it's really just educating myself how to be a solopreneur, how to market myself, and conversely, or maybe that's not the right sort of turn of phrase there, but along the way, I realized that I was right of center. It was sort of a slow awakening. And I also realized no one else is doing what I'm doing. There were very few critics who were openly right of center. And I thought it was pragmatic that I'd have like a place to kind of call my own in a way. And then also it was genuine. So it just sort of all came together. And of course, there are other right of center movie writers like yourself, John Nolte, Kyle Smith. But it's a pretty small club. And I guess I'm proud to be a member, but I wish our ranks were bigger.
Well, there you go. I mean, how long have you been doing this at this point?
Gosh, I've been covering Hollywood for at least 20 years. I've been sort of a solo agent for the last 10 or so, and there's been sort of dips along the way. But yeah, it's been a while, and I think the industry is getting more progressive. I think the industry is getting louder in its messaging, and it behooves me to kind of follow suit and sort of blaze my own trail and have an answer when they, attack my values. And along the way, what I try not to do is to be cruel or mean or to name call. I am a journalist. I'm trying to keep things in the up and up. And while I have I have a strong voice, I'm not meek. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be just kind of flinging red meat around just because that's cool and it gets more clicks. So it's a delicate dance, but it is who I am, and that makes it easier.
Yeah, I mean, I get that dance completely. Having just starting to kind of dance my way through the blogosphere, because I mean, I don't want to say anything bad. You meet a lot of people who have opinions, and when they bring people on, obviously they want people to work with them with what they believe. So it's being someone who comes from that artistic background too, I kind of butted up a bunch against that with some of my editors, trying to say things that weren't quite there, but that's obviously that's on my shoulders, because I mean I am too. I'm not as accomplished as you with 3 degrees. I only have the 1, and it's an associate's. But I definitely come from that background too, of the artist who wants to kind of say what he wants, and realizing that it's very hard to sell the things you want to write to people, especially in a blogosphere like ours that's so tight knit, that's so driven by what has to be put out immediately.
Yeah, there's a lot of internal pressures that we feel, and it's hard when you work for an editor who wants you to write either in a certain way or promoting a certain cause, and sometimes that will rub you the wrong way, and sometimes that will be very much against your values, so that's tricky. And also, anybody can throw up a website and have a film review career, and I think that's a good thing, but it just makes it more competitive. So you and I are, fighting to get heard, to get noticed, and it's tricky, and it's also maybe easier to get more outrageous and outlandish. But I think it's kind of a shorter burn. Like you kind of get some maybe attention, but are you going to last? And I'm in this for the long haul, as I assume you are too. So you have to be careful.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to be in the long haul. I mean, my goal as with anyone is eventually to get paid doing it, and so far, 7 years of experience has brought me the lovely joys of $150 from the lovely people at Rebler. So,
Hey, it takes a while. You hang in there. This is the last year. I think the last half of 2019 was my best period ever, and it took a long, long time, and it's taken an amazing amount of work. And so it can happen, but you've got to hang in there, be patient, and be persistent, and always. I feel like I'm lecturing here, but
no,
always one of the things I've been doing over the years is I have no business skill. I have no business acumen, but I've been listening to so many podcasts that teach you how to market yourself and how to share things online in the most effective way and how to brand yourself. And so I've kind of had this sort of self-education journey where I try to see what's out there for free and get smarter. And it's I've got a thick head, so it takes a while to get in there, but I think some of it actually penetrated. And I do feel like I'm more aware of what's going on and better equipped to be surviving in this space.
It's exponential too. I mean, I departed from legal insurrection in October, and since then I really kind of strapped my boots and started kind of just chugging stuff out and offering it to people. And since then I've been published by Daily Wire, I've been published by you, I've been published by Rebler. It's probably another one I'm forgetting. Edblog, my friend over at Edblog, has published me a couple times when I've had pieces that were completely insensible and unpublishable, and they've been kind enough to publish them. But I mean, that's just me. Like I every once in a while I'll come up with something that's just out there, like my novella-length article on Orson Welles, and I'll send it to my editor, and they'll be like, "Tyler, are you crazy? We can't publish this." So I just like, okay, just talk to my friends at Edblog because they'll take anything. But yeah, I mean, just in the past 2 months, I've had more opportunities to talk with people, more success than I have in 6 years. So
excellent.
A lot of this just kind of comes down to both networking as intensely as I have been for the past few years, and finally just kind of meeting the right people at the right time, and maybe hopefully eventually when the money just starts raining down on all of us, then I'll have a full-time job somewhere. But until then, I'm in this for the long haul because I love doing it, and I'm doing it for free. So
excellent. One thing I've done over the years is I've been burned, not significantly, but in ways that I could kind of lash out on social media. But I haven't done that. I've really been trying hard not to burn any bridges, not to kind of be, toxic, not to fight back at times. I fight back on my principles, but I think staying positive, staying uplifting, especially in our media space now, because it's so angry and vitriolic. And I think just being pleasant is kind of counter programming. But again, it's who I am, and it works for me. And I think it's important. It's, who needs another kind of angry soul lashing out? It's, let's have some smiles along the way.
I don't know. I got like 5 subscribers when I was completely ranting during the Oscars. So,
all right, never mind everything I said.
I don't know. Like that was amusing to me. Like every time I initially get published by someone, I'll usually get like 2 or 3 people that just kind of like, oh, who is this guy? Follow. Who is this guy? Follow. And then on Sunday night, I was just kind of like going off like, as they say in Seinfeld, like Mussolini from the balcony, just completely ranting. I wasn't even like wasn't even watching the Oscars directly. I was watching Heat, for the Michael Mann movie Heat, but I was just paying attention to it on Twitter and just completely going off. And for some reason, that caught like 5 people's attention. They're like, "Oh, this guy! I need to know what he's up to."
You never know where things happen.
Yeah, I mean, one of my goals of from last year was to try to get my Twitter account so that I have more people following me than I'm following. And unfortunately, for a while, that involved purging an enormous number of people. But then all of a sudden, you start catching people's eye, and then there you go. It's going to start becoming, like I said, it's exponential. But
yeah, I love Twitter. I think it's a really great forum. And I know people get upset at the meanness, and I see that. I get it. I just try to let it, uh, ignore it essentially. I mean, I kind of acknowledge it and move on. But I think it's a fun way to present yourself. I think it's revealing, especially for people in the media who are claiming to be, truth tellers and unbiased. That it's been very amazing to watch them kind of show their cards in ways I don't think they expected or wanted to do. But it almost takes a while to get your Twitter voice, in a sense, to kind of know what you want to say and have kind of a consistent persona. But it's worth the effort. I think it's a lot of fun.
I agree with everything you said and completely disagree with all of it, because I'm convinced that Twitter is going to be the death of society in some respects, and I've considered trying to go like full Amish and just go off the line entirely and just like live as a hermit like J.D. Salinger, but unfortunately I've made too many really good friends online to the point where I just don't want to get off because I wouldn't be able to talk to them anymore. Like I can't imagine a world now where I'm not screaming at Jacob Airy on a daily basis. So,
and the one thing that does upset me about the whole Twitter experience is when I see, let's just say, Rush Limbaugh comes out and says he's got advanced lung cancer. When I see people who blast Rush Limbaugh at this point in his life, and their presence is known, you could see who they are. Often they have blue check marks. I'm thinking, I can't imagine what kind of person not only says those things, but says it in a way that the whole world is aware of it. It's like saying your most evil, twisted thoughts and then shouting from all the rooftop saying, "This is me. I'm connecting to these evil thoughts, and you can judge me." I can't understand that, especially professionals, especially the blue checkmark types who technically are names, who have notoriety, who have a platform. The fact that they kind of expose their ugliness in such an open forum, my mind boggles. I don't know how to process it. I can't believe it.
Well, it's the it of the internet. You're just seeing people just get unleashed. Like there are people who I follow in writing and on YouTube and in different respects of life who I just cannot follow on Twitter, no matter how hard I try, because you watch their stuff or you read their articles in one respect, and you go over to Twitter and it's just they're just complete. They can't control anything they say, and they're just spitting bile on a minute by minute basis, like all throughout the day. I cannot Twitter is just it reveals so much about people that you would not expect based on how they would act in like a normal decent society, and then it just goes. And then the moment it's not even they don't even get anonymity. They just get a chance to ramble off their thoughts in a published format. It's some people just they go off. It's insane.
And I think what's amazing about it is if this were 15 years ago and we were all fairly new to the web, to social media, maybe we put up a goofy name. I'm, Han Solo 2482. And then you think, okay, people don't know who I am, and I'm not realizing the scope of this, that this could live on, that someone could screen cap it. I get that. You put your worst self out there, it's a release, and you kind of just shoot from the hip. But today, knowing all we know, knowing about cancel culture, how you could lose jobs, how employers can look at you and say, yeah, no thanks. For all those reasons, why in the world do people reveal as much as they do?
I'm wondering how much in the future, like, Twitter is just going to become like a thing that people just have to kind of ignore, because we're gonna get to a point in like 40 years we're gonna have presidential candidates who have been on Twitter for their entire life, and there's going to be some interesting debates when we get to that point. Like we're having problems now. We're having problems with Chris Rock going back a decade into his past, like saying things that get him in trouble. Like imagine like 30 years from now when we have presidential candidates who were on Twitter at age 5. Holy crap.
It's also possible that we mature as a society, that we kind of grow through this. Hopefully it's a juvenile stage, and that we learn to, I wouldn't say ignore Twitter, but sort of take it, with a grain of salt, and also think, hey, I need to look at the totality of someone's life, as opposed to, they cured cancer, but they had a mean tweet when they were 12, So I hope and think, and maybe I'm too optimistic, that we will kind of grow into this whole part of ourselves and understand this is just a small aspect of our lives. We don't know though. Maybe things get worse. I mean, we could be these could be the glory days of the internet.
Well, either society is going to mature into these tendencies and be like, oh, you said you dropped the F-bomb on Twitter when you were 5 years old, whatever, and or we're just gonna have to go like full Amish, and 90% of society is gonna have to tune out of Twitter and just go back to some semblance of what life was like before the internet. Because I don't see chaos perpetuating forever. Like, I think at some point it just has to grow into one of the two, into more internet or less internet, and you can't really just have continued chaos forever.
The one thing I will predict is that I feel like the culture is moving at such a rapid pace. It used to be where our attitudes and our behaviors would change slowly over time. Now I feel like we can change on a dime. I think that's fascinating. The fact that we can adjust and evolve and adapt so quickly as a society, not just person to person. So that's interesting too. And yeah, I'm not remotely smart enough to predict the future, but it's going to be unlike anything we've come to know, and it's going to happen much quicker than we expected.
Well, if the last 4 years have taught us anything, it's that we shouldn't try predicting the future because we're probably wrong. As the last two primaries have shown, if you try to predict anything, you're probably wrong. So, anyway, now that I've continued my tradition of thoroughly burying the lead, I did want to talk about the Oscars. So
Do we have to?
kind of. We're film critics.
That's true.
So, what, as someone who actually watched the Oscars and didn't just drunkenly spitball, what were your thoughts on seeing this all play out live?
When I was a kid, I loved the Oscars. When I was a teenager, I loved the Oscars. I've always been a movie guy. And for me, it's the assignment of the year that I dread possibly the most. And it's not just the politics. It's a very boring presentation. There's very little spontaneity to it. There's not a lot of excitement to it. The banter is just punishing at times. And as a guy who loves Hollywood and loves the glamorous side of things, they don't even have movie stars. You don't see the Denzels or the Meryl Streeps or the Susan Sarandon or, the Jack Nicholsons. It's often people who, to our faces, say, "You don't know me," blah, 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 because we don't know them. Now, I understand you're trying to be hip and young, but, for every young face you throw in there with maybe a budding career, why not throw in the greats, the Dustin Hoffmans of the world? I'm so perplexed by the whole presentation, and I'm surprised that the show gets 20 plus million people watching. It's a terrible show. The production seems to get worse almost every year. And, that's sort of the show side of things. As far as the awards, I had no problem with the awards. Parasite was not my best movie of the year, but it's a good movie. It's interesting. It's challenging. And I thought that 2019 was a very solid year for films. I think there were a lot of great choices, extremely interesting performances. We had a comic book movie that was so dramatic there was no CGI involved. Like, of course, I'm talking about Joker. I thought it was a nice bounce back year for movies. And I wish there was a ceremony that could honor that. But we didn't. We got one on Sunday, but it didn't do the trick.
I mean, this year, 2019 was weird to me as a year in general, just because it felt like most of the stuff that was worth talking about in terms of the best of the year seemed to come out in the last, month and a half, where I just felt like I spent, every single week I was going to the movies, 3 times just to catch up, oh gosh, stop! But, I loved it. It was great to get all that stuff at once, but, by the time we finally got to the Oscars slate, this was a very strong year in terms of what could have been nominated when what was. And it's kind of weird that they ultimately didn't go with the full 10 movie slate, because I felt like they probably could have filled in a couple more. But what would have been your best picture?
I thought Joker was the best picture of the year. It just wowed me, and I saw it early enough, but there was still a lot of hype around it when I did actually catch it. I thought Jojo Rabbit was excellent. What a tough subject matter to tackle. It's a comedy. It made me laugh very hard. It was thoughtful. It was soulful. And I thought Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was excellent. It's, Tarantino has his usual excess. He demands an editor who doesn't use one, in the way that they should to kind of whittle down the fat. but it was still had so many wonderful moments. The ranch scene, the Bruce Lee fight. There's just a great camaraderie there between Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio. So I thought that was great. Ford versus Ferrari was just fine entertainment, well acted, powerful, visually arresting. I mean, I can go on and on. I thought Waves was excellent. It got absolutely no attention from the Oscar season, but it's a very good film if you see it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I could go on. I mean, it's just a Marriage Story was as powerful as you could possibly get and still kind of retain some humanity. A good year.
You see, the funny thing was, I like Joker a lot too. I was rooting for it to win, but I wasn't doing it because I necessarily cared if it got the Best Picture. Because for what it is, it already has the cultural respect it deserves. I just kind of was hoping it would win just because I wanted to see the right heads explode. Because I mean, last year after freaking Green Book won, which I adore Green Book. I think it's a great movie. I think it captures what it's trying to do really well, and the way people treated Green Book as though it was like the most like obnoxious, like they just treated it like it was didn't completely undeserving, like it had robbed like all these huge prestige movies of their chance of winning a Best Picture. I was just so excited. Like, I hope Joker wins because I want to see the most obnoxious people on Twitter just have a year-long meltdown where they just can't get over the fact that this movie won, especially after how obnoxious all the news networks got when that movie came out back in September and October. But I don't know. Like, I agree that Parasite is very good, and I think I forget. I don't know how to pronounce his name, and I apologize to him. I think it's Boon Jong Ho. I think he is absolutely deserving of the fact of what he of the title. He gave a great speech. I appreciate what he was, and unfortunately, all the people whose heads I wanted to see explode got really happy about it. So I was a little disappointed, just from a cultural perspective. But
yeah, we will always have Green Book that moment, but I think Parasite had some serious flaws in it, which really bugged me. But I give him credit, the director, for giving some really fun speeches. I thought they were self-deprecating. I thought he was sharing the love, toasting his fellow honorees. I thought he hit all the right notes. And it's funny, he's a kind of a political fellow. I mean, Okja's got a lot of messaging in there, and I thought that was a really weak effort. Snowpiercer was about, class warfare again, and also climate change. But I expected him to use his podium time to go off, but I thought he gave great speeches. So, good for him.
I suspect he cares more about film than he cares about anything else, and I kind of respect him for being the kind of guy who for whom winning an award like that actually means a lot, even if it doesn't necessarily mean something to me as someone who is frustrated with the institution of the Oscars. So seeing him go up on stage and just warmly embrace it is like, oh, I'm glad you won. You deserved it. I mean, well, tell me about some of your flaws with Parasite, because I don't hear a lot of people criticizing it all that much.
My biggest problem, I think the third act takes a dramatic twist, which I don't think is earned. That's a big issue. But for me, so it's focusing on an impoverished family who manages kind of to sneak into the lives of this rich family and make a living from them. But when I watch the poor family, it starts out with, well, they can barely fold pizza boxes. That's how pathetic they are, how they have a lack of motivation. They seem maybe mentally challenged. They seem like they can barely function. And then they put together these series of very elaborate cons that are sophisticated and smart. I'm like, wait, is that the same family? And then a few, maybe 10, 20, 30 minutes later, that same family is acting like, bumpkins again. Like it didn't, to get the plot where it needed to go. I thought that there was a real sort of the director was sort of pushing the family in different directions to make stuff happen. But I don't think it sort of worked within the family's structure. It didn't make sense to me. So that kept kind of pushing me out of the experience.
I was kind of sort of worried about what its conclusion is. Like, I think it's a great movie. I'm not sure what its final conclusion on the nature of classes, though, because it's working on such a weird level where it portrays the poor family as disheveled and backstabbing and kind of cruel, but it also portrays the rich family as not they're not bad people. Like they don't deserve to have their lives ruined by what happens by the end of the film. So I'm just sitting here trying to figure out what its ultimate purpose on what its ultimate statement on the nature of class is, and I'm worried about that because all the people I'm generally annoyed by on Twitter are sitting here praising it as though it's saying something profound. And I'm like, is this saying something more radical than I think it is? Is that why it won its Oscars?
I think the fact that it's evoking income inequality in such a dramatic way is the catnip for select critics. And I like the fact that he does portray the poor family as deeply flawed and shows the richer family as, maybe more clueless than cruel or evil. I think that to his credit, it wasn't, hitting you over the head. But I also thought it was obvious the theme's all the same. And I often think the best movies leave you with a dozen messages. I've heard so many people talk about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and what they took away from it. And I feel like every story was different. I think that's a great thing to say about a movie. Not like, okay, here's the lesson, get it. No, it's like I'm stirring the pot and throwing these different possibilities out to you, and then each viewer can kind of take what he or she wants out of it. That's the best art to me.
That's fair. And I'm very much an authorial intent kind of guy, so I'm always kind of worried as to what the author is trying to say at any given point, even if I don't totally understand it. Like, I think it's interesting when you can have people go into a piece and come away with different attitudes about it, but I also think that's also an attitude that can get disabused. Like, I see a lot of postmodern critics online. Like, there's one in particular I could send your way, who's been trying to use the film Casablanca and like reframe it as like an Antifa film. So you can dissociate enough into like postmodern nonsense to the point where like the author is dead, the film doesn't mean anything. You take away from it what you want, and this something that's classic that clearly means something to a very specific author then becomes what you want of it. So my general concern with something like Parasite is, why is someone who's so radical embracing it? And I mean, obviously the depiction is there. It's the depiction of wealth inequality is obviously embedded into the film, just into the way it builds its setting. Like, you have the poor people that are so poor that they can only see the world through like a window that they have to look up into, and then the rich people who are so rich that they have like that they are living on basically on top of the world and right next to a forest, while everyone else beneath them is living underground. I'm always just kind of worried when it comes to something like that, when in terms of what it's intending to say and what people ultimately do take away from it.
No, I agree with that. I mean, I think ultimately the artist has the final say, and the artist may say, my movie really captures X. But I suspect that a lot of artists would love to see different interpretations. I think it's up to the viewer when they give those different interpretations to back up their claims, to make a strong argument. And I think that's where maybe things go awry, where if I'm a conservative and I see a movie and I kind of twist it so dramatically to fit my worldview, then shame on me. But if I can kind of defend myself and say, you know what, I know this film wasn't meant to be a conservative treatise, but look at this and that and there. And you can come away with saying, yeah, I could see that. I think that's pretty valuable.
Yeah, I think there are... Now, I'm going to criticize myself for doing the thing that I just criticized another person for, but I think there's a difference between, like, finding strains of an idea that you relate to in a movie versus what the film is saying itself. Because obviously, I mean, I write the series of Flawed Faith over at Geeks Under Grace, and that's all about trying to find very specific kinds of themes and ideas in movies that ultimately aren't exploring those ideas, and seeing if I can argue through them and what I can say using these movies otherwise. But I still think that the intent is there, regardless of what my what I can take away from one aspect of the film. So at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that the artist's intent is preserved, and it's something that's ultimately not going to like feed into whatever. Because obviously, I don't. If a movie came out of Hollywood like tomorrow, that's like completely pro-communist and it got like thrown to the top of Hollywood, we'd probably need to have some uncomfortable conversations about whether or not we should support it in a sort of meaningful way. So,
gotcha. On a kind of a semi-related note, there's a movie coming soon called Mr. Stalin. Mr. Jones, and it's about the journalist who kind of broke through the lies of the Soviet Union and told the truth about what was going on, the mass starvations, things like that. And it delves into Walter Duranty, the journalist from the New York Times, who was celebrated, and how he told a fake story. He was Michelle Malkin calls him the originator of fake news. And I'm reading the early reviews, I think often from the overseas critics, and instead of connecting that to what's going on with fake news today and all these stories that are made up and all the misleading headlines, they're saying, well, this just reminds us we need real news more than ever now in the age of Trump. Like, boy, that's not the message I would take. That's the New York Times pushing a monstrously false narrative, and they're doing that again. So it's just, I feel like even when you get a story that you conservatives you think that would rally around, the critics sort of say, oh no, it's not that, it's this. And I think in that case, it's really disingenuous.
I think the best example of that would be like Joker, because you see all these people that are connecting with it in ways that critics who don't like the film are like, oh, it's toxic white male rage. But then that movie gets shipped over to Hong Kong, and you see people dressing up as the Joker in protest to the Chinese government. So the whatever uncomfortable context you can read into a film like Joker, it's still capturing some sort of transcendent value outside of the petty grievances of partisan politics here in America, and saying something that speaks to people across cultural boundaries. And I think that's what a good film should do. Like, that movie has a lot to say, and if someone in Hong Kong is gonna dress as Joker and stand up to the Chinese police, I'm like, go for it. That's probably speaks more to what that film says than umpteenth guy at New York Times saying, oh, it's bad because white male rage.
Yeah, the whole evocation of white in the political and the social conversation today makes me sick to my stomach. It shouldn't need to be said, but I want equality, I want free speech, I want people of all races and colors to be treated equally. And yet we're doing this thing where we're kind of weaponizing whiteness against white people. It's often done by other white people, and I think it's just nauseating. And I think it's setting cultural progress back quite a ways. And I wish it would stop, and I wish it would be called out. But even calling it out could be problematic and get you in trouble. So it's very frustrating to me.
Yeah, I mean, even with just the Joker film, like I found I was seeing memes of the movie where people were like, oh, what is the movie saying? It's like, oh, it's about wealth inequality, it's about mental health care, it's about societal chaos, it's about rioting, it's about the way the media portrays political revolutions and all the stuff. And then immediately it's just this, and it cuts to the SNL, that irritating SNL bit of the woman singing about white male rage, which I'm sure you've seen at this point.
I saw the headline about that skit, and I wasn't strong enough to watch it. I couldn't. I often suffer from my art, and I sit through 3.5 hours of the Oscars. But for that sketch, I just knew where it was going. I knew it wouldn't be funny. I knew it wouldn't be clever. I knew it would be woke on steroids, and I gave myself a pass on that one.
From the same people that gave us the Black Jeopardy bit just 3 years ago, it's completely shameful. Like, it's not even necessarily rooted specifically about Joker, because they bring up The Irishman and I think there's another film, I forget which one, but like I think it was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like, if your takeaway after watching all three of those films is just that this is a year for white people to be angry, that's obnoxious and cloying, and it doesn't speak to people on actually trying to engage with the art.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. To see great films that tackle complex issues in so many interesting and unique ways, and say, it's white rage. I feel sorry for those people. I feel sorry for film critics who, put on their woke hat and then they eviscerate a movie because it doesn't have the right a number of minority faces or an actress doesn't get enough lines. I just feel sorry for them. It must be torturous to live like that. Listen, I don't want women to get pushed aside. I want diversity, but what it's become now is this cartoonish, ridiculous, over the top nature that suffocates art and suffocates art criticism. It's sad, and I laugh at it and I point it out, but I part of me just feels sad for them.
It's dishonest too, because if any reasonable look at the film industry would show that there's never been a better time for minority or female filmmakers than right now. Like, just in the last year, you had amazing films like Blind Spotting and Little Women and stuff like that are getting thrown to the top of the cultural conversation. And a lot of there's a lot of films I have major disagreements with. Like, I found Sorry to Bother You to be Marxist nonsense, but I will credit it as an amazing film that I just happen to disagree with. But that movie was widely celebrated by a lot of people, even though a lot of people disagreed with it. So the idea that these films just aren't like breaking out, or these films aren't getting the credit they're due, it's only like in really marginal sense, like just specifically with the Oscars. And I'm hard pressed to think the people that really, really care about Little Women also really, really care about whether or not this particular institution gives it this particular award. So
yeah, and I think the audiences, I think they've mostly cast aside the racist shackles. I mean, one of the biggest movies this year was Bad Boys for Life with 2 black stars. I mean, the Fast and Furious franchise couldn't be more diverse, but the focus isn't necessarily on diversity. It's on family and crazy action that defies all the laws of physics and done in a way that's tongue-in-cheek and silly and fun. No one stays home because there's a person of color in the cast. We all go see it. We love it. I can't wait for the next movie. I think audiences in that way are actually much more progressive than Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, I even see like the Wonder Woman trailer. Like, that movie seems to be very clearly kind of spoofing on Trump, because it has the 1980s businessman who's clearly like a parody of Trump as he was in the 1980s. And I haven't met anyone that's upset about the movie, because at the very least it seems like it's probably going to be a pretty good movie, even if it is a little cloying. But like, Black Panther was one of the biggest movies this year, and it got audiences regardless of race. Wonder Woman was huge when that came out, so I just don't see the people are unwilling to engage with this stuff.
No, it's quality matters. You know what really matters most of all? Trailers. When the Wonder Woman trailer came out, it was good. When the Ghostbusters movie came out, the trailer, it was terrible. And ironically, Suicide Squad had some of the best trailers around, and the movie was just a pile of steaming you-know-what. So we could be tricked, but the trailer is all important. And if the trailer is good, audiences are going to line up for it. I don't think they care what color the stars are. Just be entertaining, charismatic, and tell us a good story. Or have Vin Diesel.
We're saying that right on the cusp of Birds of Prey coming out, and that movie is getting a lot of the same criticisms thrown at it, where it's a handful, where people are saying it's like, oh, men don't want to see Birds of Prey. And I mean, I saw it because I wanted to review it, but the trailers did not sell it. It didn't look like something that I think most people wanted to see, especially since a lot of it was, a lot of people probably got turned off by Suicide Squad, and there's like, oh, it's the sequel to Suicide Squad. And yet everyone on Twitter is just like, oh, I can't believe all the incels didn't want to go see Birds of Prey, and now there's not going to be another Harley Quinn movie.
Yeah, all those misogynists who skip Birds of Prey will be waiting in line for hours to see Black Widow. It's a silly argument. It's quality. We care, and I think there's a segment of social media nation that does reject the you must like this. This is feminism. You must accept it, love it, worship it. You cannot critique it. I think that does turn some people off. Turns me off.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't necessarily like ruin something like Captain Marvel though, but obviously that had the MCU sticker on it. So
yeah, that was a bad movie to me, and I'm amazed it made so much money. I guess some people liked it, but it was an inferior product. But that MCU brand is bulletproof. It'll be interesting to see what happens next, but Captain Marvel was not a good movie, and And Brie Larson, who's a fine actress, is not a superhero actress. And maybe she'll prove me wrong next time around, but I thought she was a terrible choice in retrospect. And it just makes all the other casting decisions look genius because Robert Downey Jr., Scarlett Johansson, Chris Evans, Samuel L. Jackson, they all nail their parts. Mark Ruffalo, I can go on and on. So I think we got used to great casting moves. And then we got Brie Larson, who just looked stiff and lacking that presence. It isn't easy to play a superhero. There's a balance there you got to kind of pull off, and I just don't think she did it.
And I think with that movie, like one of the great understated problems with that movie is they didn't pick directors that knew how to handle a movie like that. Like, I think I remember when that movie came out, I looked up their record for what they'd previously directed, and there was like one other movie because Marvel did that thing they do where they go like hang out at the indie circuit and find a guy who's directed one movie before, and we're like, okay, great, you can handle a $200 million movie. And with that case, they picked a brother and sister directing team, and I think they made something that was probably like loosely on par with like Thor: The Dark World in terms of quality, which is, I guess there's like a basement in terms of how bad a movie can be with like the MCU, because I don't think they've ever made a movie that's like excruciatingly bad before. But
yeah, I'd agree.
But like with that movie, there's no voice behind it. There's no clear artistic intent. Like, you can tell that someone probably sat there and thought about like, oh, this is a movie about coming to terms with yourself and against a society that tells you what you can't be. But it doesn't do it in a way that's visually creative or interesting in the way that like James Gunn directs his movies, or the way Joss Whedon made the Avengers. It doesn't have that kind of singular artistic voice to it. So it just feels so flat the entire movie.
I agree with that, but I will say that the MCU rolled the dice on the Russo brothers, who you've looked at their resume, it was shockingly thin. It was it You, Me, and Dupree was one of their highlights, and that turned out to be a sensational choice. And even, I'm not a big fan of the recent Spider-Man films, but I believe that director had Cop Car to his credit. So I think that approach can work. It is risky, and I think it didn't pay off with Captain Marvel. So I get what you're saying. I think you're right, but it's not always a slam dunk that they can't do it. Sometimes it proves really remarkable.
Well, with the Russo brothers, like, they didn't sign them to direct Captain America 3 like from the outset, though. Like, they just hired them to do the one Captain America movie after what's his name did the first one, the guy who did Rocket Man.
Joe Johnston?
Yeah. So it wasn't like something where they clearly had a vision for the Captain America becoming like the lead character for all the sequels. It was just they took a risk on the guys who were directing like really good episodes of Community, and they said, okay, do okay here, and then maybe we'll hire you again. And they did. So they brought him back for Captain America: Civil War, and then they realized, oh wait, these guys are good enough to handle the Infinity War cycle. So they gave him that. So it was in that case they earned it. Whereas I don't think you're gonna see a lot of the mid-tier, the Captain Marvel team come back, or it's weird that the Spider-Man team keeps coming back because they keep making movies that are basically the exact same quality over and over again, but they make a lot of money. So they've chosen well with the actors playing Spider-Man, I will say. So that definitely helps immensely. But yeah, it's interesting. And I don't know where the superhero genre goes from here, but I love that Joker exists, if only because it was such a stretch and such an atypical presentation. I mean, it was really a character study. Often people say, "Oh, this is a character study." No, it's a block movie with some good acting involved. But Joker, man, no action, no CGI, no Batman popping in, and it worked. And that's a big budget, major studio release with a lot riding on it, and it soared, and I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, it was a huge risk. I appreciate the fact that DC was willing to do that. I mean, that seems to be the one thing they're good at, as opposed to Marvel, is that they seem to be so willing to just throw whatever at the wall and see what works. And I'm glad they got richly rewarded for taking a huge risk, and I don't look forward to them taking the wrong lessons from that and making the Lex Luthor movie. But
yeah. That's funny. And I don't even know what you do next with the Joker or with Joaquin Phoenix. I don't think he's the kind of guy you're going to plug into 8 movies. I don't think he's, I think, but it might have been Ben Shapiro mentioned this, and I thought it was a good point. when you, as much as I love the Joker movie, at the end of it, do you see that guy emerging as a super crime genius who's going to battle Batman? I don't. So that's kind of complicated too.
No, I don't think that. I mean, maybe you could do some sort of like really fan servicey thing where it turns out that like the actual comic Joker was inspired by this Joker, and then maybe the sequel is about those two characters interacting or something like that. But honestly, I'd be surprised if they actually got Joaquin back for another one of these.
They're going to throw so much money at him, he will come back. But it's, repeating what he did. I don't know. I think it could be a debacle.
Yeah, I mean, it would be fascinating if nothing else. Although it's funny watching the people who just hate Joker and hate everything about it. Like, Joaquin at the Oscars was probably more out there than most of the people that actually spoke.
I think if his Joker character was on stage giving a presentation, it would have been more coherent. So
maybe the great secret of Joker was just that it wasn't actually a performance. I don't know.
Whatever it was great. So
did you see you will what was that movie he did in 2018? You Shall Not. I forget the name. You Were Never Here.
He made two movies in the last couple of years. They were both very atypical. One was, I think he was kind of like a killer for hire, and I can't. I'm blanking titles, and I remember not liking that as much as the critics raved about it. It was interesting for sure. He's always magnetic, but listen, he's a fascinating actor. I met him years ago. He was doing a mediocre movie called, I think it was Ladder 49 or something like that, with John Travolta, and he had just gotten the Walk the Line gig, and I wanted to ask him just a smidge about it, because why not? And he kind of gently shut me down and said, I'm not talking about that. So I guess he was sort of getting into his character or the process and didn't want to go there for an interviewer. But he's an odd dude, but not a bad guy, just an odd dude.
Well, there you go. I think he was also in that Mary Magdalene movie playing Jesus in the last year or two. So I think I don't perceive him as a modest guy in the grand scheme of things.
He's got range, that's for sure. Joker to Jesus.
Or the other way around, I don't know. But so what are you looking forward to going into this year?
Gosh, it's not a year that excites me. I think Black Widow will be solid. Wonder Woman, the sequel, I'm sure will be enjoyable. I fear the new James Bond movie. I think that Daniel Craig's heart isn't in it. It's just paycheck territory now for him. And I thought the last film, Spectre, I think it was, I thought that was a real big letdown. A Quiet Place Part 2, I love the first movie. The sequel seems like it's got some prequel in it, and the trailer's excellent. Nothing's jumping out at me like I can't wait to see it, honestly. There's nothing on my radar. Maybe I'm not aware of the entire slate. Maybe some things will pop up that are intriguing me. But what about you? What's on your must-see list, or what are you excited about?
I put out a list on Twitter a couple weeks ago just with the stuff that was immediately popping out. Like, there's not, other than like Black Widow, there's not like a lot of huge studio films this year that I'm absolutely dying to see. Like, all the stuff that seems to be catching my attention is just weird, offbeat stuff from established directors. Like, we're getting the Tenet from Nolan is coming out.
Yeah, that looks interesting. Always worth a shot for him.
The guy who did the Death of Stalin movie has a David Copperfield movie coming out. The Dune adaptation is probably going to be interesting. I have no idea how that's going to turn out, but that's coming out this year.
Well, I think this was just announced very recently. The Hunt is finally going to hit theaters in March, so I'm curious about it. I think after all the hoopla, I think it's going to be a big letdown, but I still want to see it.
Yeah, but other than that, all the stuff that seems to be really interesting is like indie like not even just indie stuff, but like established director stuff. Like Charlie Kaufman has a movie coming out, Edgar Wright has a movie coming out, David Fincher has a movie coming out, but Top Gun. I'm not even a huge Top Gun fan, but I really like the Top Gun trailer.
Yeah, I do too. A quick prediction: I think both the Top Gun sequel and the new Bill and Ted's movie, I think they're going to underperform. I don't think they'll bomb. I think they're going to underperform. I just get the sense that today's audiences, that's not where they're at. And I think people you're younger than me, but people my age are going to be interested, and maybe we don't even go see it. We just kind of like the fact that it exists and that we can see the trailers. We can kind of relive our past. But I just think it's not going to hit the zeitgeist like they think it is.
I mean, I'm looking at those some movies I didn't grow up with because I didn't watch Bill and Ted or Top Gun until I was as an adult. So when it comes to me looking at those movies, I'm looking at that as like Tom Cruise and Keanu Reeves movies. So I'm curious if the movies are going to perform on those levels, like because Tom Cruise is coming off a very, very good work in Mission Impossible Fallout. So I'm thinking, like, is he going to get some residual good luck off of that movie being, like, the most successful film of the past few... Like, the most successful studio film of the past few years and just rake in the cash on just that?
Yeah, we'll see. But I think what you kind of hinted at is that if you look at last year versus this year, last year had Star Wars and Avengers, the final chapter. This year doesn't have anything remotely that big, and I wonder about the box office. You know, it could be maybe we'll both. I'll be wrong, and it'll kind of surprise us. But the box office could be a debacle. It really could without those big ones. The kind of the rising tide lifts all boats. They're not going to be. There's no rising tide with those.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Black Widow and Eternals are going to do fine, but I'd be surprised if either of them are, like, the biggest thing this year. I mean, we could wind up in a situation where, like, the two biggest films of the year are Black Widow and Wonder Woman 2, just because they're like the only major studio films other than, like, Tenet.
Yeah, and again, that Tenet will do well, very, very well. It's not going to be 400,000 to 500,000, a million. It's not, doesn't have that ceiling. It just won't.
Yeah, I mean, it's speaking for films that I'm personally excited for, regardless of whether or not they're going to be possible or not. We are supposed to be getting a Tom Clancy film in September. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No, I have not.
I'm trying to remember which one. Michael B. Jordan. I'm looking it up on Wikipedia right now because the name's escaping me. We're getting Without Remorse. I don't know if you've read that one or not.
I have not, no.
Okay, it's basically the prequel to Rainbow Six, so it's not one of the Jack Ryan novels, but it is one of his like Spec Ops, not like Spec Ops novels where it's about like a special forces team. So, with Michael B. Jordan as the lead, so that could potentially be one of the more interesting things to come out this year, at least for me, because I am a huge Hunt for Red October fan, so that's my personal dumb thing I'm excited for.
I've kind of heard from a bunch of different people in the last maybe 2 years or so who went back and rewatched The Hunt for Red October, the movie, and they all came away saying, boy, that's a great film. It really stands the test of time. So, listen, maybe for all the lack of Star Wars and Avengers, maybe the year will surprise us in different ways. No one saw A Quiet Place coming. That was just a shock that it was so good and such a big hit. So maybe we'll have a bunch of sleepers that'll save the season or the year.
I think that's what's ultimately gonna have to happen because you're not gonna maybe there's like a live action Disney film I'm not thinking of that's coming out this year, like that might. Oh yeah, we got Mulan coming out in like a month, but I totally forgot about that. Like maybe there's another one because it feels like that would probably be the other big thing that would happen because Disney is like the obviously the studio that to watch out for, but it feels like in the past year they kind of hit their stride with Avengers, Lion King, and Star Wars in 1 year. Like I can't imagine following up with anything of that.
I think this year's going to have 2 Pixar movies. One is called Onward, and there's not, the name is escaping me, but that Pixar doesn't mess around, so that could be a salvation of sorts. And of course, you got the family, the audience right in there too. So we shall see.
Well, there you go. I've taken an hour of your time, so I won't make you stay any longer. But I appreciate you coming on. Like I said before, you've helped a lot with getting me off the ground and kind of helping me kind of find something of an audience. So thank you so much for that, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, as they say at Chick-fil-A, my pleasure.
But spoken like a true conservative. That
sort of be a cliche, but
well, there you go. Have a wonderful night.
Thanks, you too.